started. All right, good afternoon. This is Tenant Associations and Residence Councils. Where do we begin? Um, oh, okay. So the purpose of this workshop is to provide information to tenants seeking information on how to form a tenant association or residence council that can serve as an advocate on behalf of tenants and residents. I am your facilitator today. My name is Dolores Anderson. I am the Education and Outreach Coordinator for the Office of the Tenant Advocate. What that means is I don't handle cases, folks, so don't call me about the Mickey Mouses in your unit and that type of thing. People still call me. It's like, I know, but I like dealing with you. I don't do that anymore. I do education and outreach. We do go and do outreach at buildings, but you have to give us advance notice. And generally, I'm the one that does most of the outreach activities. The attorneys go out, depending on what it is, a lot of times with this TOPA. I don't blame them for not wanting to go out because they are not entitled to overtime. So, whereas I'm entitled to overtime, they're not. They're just sort of like giving their time to the agency. Okay. So the first thing is, what is the difference between a tenant association and a residence council? The reason why we included residence council, well, the one reason is because the chief tenant advocate wanted it included. Because I had started my presentation just on tenant associations, but she wanted something on residence council. So basically, the difference is a tenant association is a group of tenants formed into a group that advocates on behalf of tenants. A tenant association can be incorporated or unincorporated in the district. A residence council is an organization of residents in public housing. That is the difference. Okay, is the resident council generally is public housing. And that comes under the jurisdiction of the DC Housing Authority.
But could they be tax credit properties?
No, a residence council, because I'm going to give you the regulations statute, is for tax credit buildings, you have to go to actually the IRS regulations. It doesn't come under the Department of Housing and Community Development. Okay. So residence councils, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, or as we commonly refer to it, HUD, has a policy on tenant participation. At least that's what appears in the regulations. And they want to promote resident participation and active involvement of residents in all aspects of public housing. They have the right to organize and to elect a resident council to represent their interests. What is the role of the residence council? The role is to improve the quality of life and resident satisfaction and participate in self-help initiatives to enable residents to create a positive living environment for families living in public housing. Now, I'm going to have to tell you right off the bat, I don't work that often with people in public housing. I did contact the Housing Authority to request a copy of the most current list of residence councils, and she would not send me one because she said it has public information, or has information on it that the tenants may not want public. Now, I have received that list in the past. I don't have a current list.
Is it on the website? I think it's on the website.
No, I haven't seen it on the website. You would have to see. Yes.
Would you say that last sentence again?
About the website?
No. About she didn't want to give you.
Because it has the residence councils, the names and addresses, and so you got to give permission. I guess that's their policy now. Give permission to release that information. I can understand that up to a point. Because one of the things, and we're going to talk about that later, is the tenant association form that's in your packet, is we are asking people about permission to release certain information. So we just don't give out email addresses and telephone numbers because you call up and want to know who is the president of ABC Tenant Association and how can I get in contact with that person. So we're trying to update our master list on the website, so we need to ask, can we give that information out?
That
Okay.
might be helpful if you get news people calling, because I have seen people interviewed on TV
Mhm.
after fires and things,
Yes,
and they'll identify them as president of the TA.
right, yeah. Well, let's save that, because I'm going to talk about tenant association. And some of it's good, some of it's bad, and some of it's ugly. So, if the first thing is you need to find out if you are in public housing, if there is a residence council for your building. And to do that, you have to contact the Office of Resident Services with the Housing Authority. And for those of you that may not know, the Housing Authority is located at 1133 North Capitol Street, Northeast. So you can contact them. If there is an existing residence council, but it is inactive, you need to ask for a copy of the council bylaws to figure out how do you fill those vacant positions so that you can have an active residence council. Now, there are some requirements for establishing residence council, and basically these are coming from the federal regs. The council can represent residents residing in scattered site buildings, areas of continuous row houses, one or more contiguous buildings or development or a combination of these buildings or developments. I am most familiar with a development, such as Berry Farms is a public housing development. You have to adopt written procedures which provides for election of residents to the governing board. And then you have to democratically elect people to the governing board, and at the minimum, there must be 5 board members. And the voting membership consists of heads of household, any age, and other residents at least 18 years of age or older, and his or her name appears on the lease. So when it says any age, that means 18 years or older, because anyone under 18 is a minor and cannot enter into a contract, which is what a lease is. So then they give you, the regulations give you your election procedures and standards. You can use an independent third party to oversee elections and recall procedures. You have to assure fair and frequent elections at least every 3 years. You get staggered terms, and term limits are discretionary by the council. And the council must adopt election and recall procedures in the bylaws. I have served as a monitor of elections at not a public housing, but at a project-based project. Yes.
That's the question that I was gonna have. We recently had an election, and we have to have another election, and we need a third party. So is there a database for, third party, independent third parties that can come in and oversee the election?
Yeah, usually it is the folks who, what they consider third parties, the folks that get money from the Department of Housing and Community Development. They're getting community block grant money. So you're talking housing counseling services, LEDC, NANA. You can certainly contact our office to see if someone is available to serve as a monitor or an overseer.
What if they own the building though, like a housing partnership? What if they're the actual landlord?
What if they're what do you mean?
Or either there's something called Montgomery Housing Partnership, which is a nonprofit that, I know it's kind of complicated.
Okay, yeah, it's, we're gonna get to the statute in just a moment, but if the nonprofit owns the property, they should not be involved in the tenant association matters. It's just, even if there wasn't a statute, it's just inappropriate, because they can't go in and start trying to influence and that type of thing. The election procedures should include qualifications to run for office, the frequency of elections, procedures for recall, and term limits if desired. And the voting members must be given sufficient sufficient notice, that's at least 30 days that there's going to be an election. And the Public Housing Authority must monitor the election process and establish a procedure to appeal any adverse decision. Now, as I said before, I've had very little dealings with this. I can't tell you if the Housing Authority is actually doing this or not. There's an eligibility for resident council membership. Any member of the public housing household whose name is on the lease and meets the requirement of the bylaws. Public housing, as with non-public housing, there is a problem with people staying in folks' units and they're not on the lease. They can't participate. So the resident council can establish additional criteria, and the right to vote should be limited to the designated heads of household and other members of the household who are 18 years of age or older, and his or her name appears on the lease. And any person who meets these qualifications can run for office. The residents' council should be involved in the overall policy, development, and direction of the Public Housing Authority's operation. Now, I do know that there are a couple of people here at the summit who are public housing activists, and they live in public housing. So I hope one of them or both will come to the session and they can sort of share information about whether or not all of this stuff actually occurs. Yes?
As far as elections, can the bylaws say we have to be co-chairs?
Okay, let me tell you what's going to happen with bylaws. I'm not going to get into any great detail about bylaws. If you have time, you need to come to the session after this one, and I'm going to do a detailed presentation on creating bylaws, because it is a hot mess among a lot of the tenant associations. It is a mess. And I said one of the things, for those of you that I have regular contact with, know that I've been talking about it for quite some time. I'm going to retire soon. This is my gift to the tenant community, is get your stuff in order. Okay. So residence councils are supposed to receive training opportunities. And I don't know if that happens, but there's community organization and leadership training, there's organizational development training, there's training on public housing policy programs, rights and responsibilities, and public housing tenants are no different than non-public housing tenants. Most of them do not know what is going on. They haven't read anything, they don't know anything. Oh, I don't know about this. And all of this, a lot of this is in writing. There is a handbook that is put out by HUD that's called The Rights and Responsibilities of Tenants. Everyone should have that and should read it. Most tenants in public housing don't even know that they have a right to a fair hearing. Yes?
Where can you get that book?
You can get it online from HUD, and you can also ask the Housing Authority to give you a copy.
That's thank you.
Now, if there's a conflict of interest, which means that a resident council officer cannot serve as a contractor or as employee if they are in a policy-making or supervising position at the Housing Authority. Basically, all that means is that you cannot have people who are part of management, the Housing Authority, sitting on the Residents' Council, making decisions, particularly if they're not in the best interest of the residents.
What if they're like contractors who provide resident services?
In public housing, this is what this is saying, that they can't participate on resident council. When we get to tenant associations, I'm going to tell you my opinion, they should not be involved. Okay. The interesting thing about residence council, though, is they get money. And I don't know how many, I don't know how many tenants in public housing know this, but each resident council gets funding, or is supposed to get funding. And the interesting thing is, even if the Public Housing Authority is having financial difficulty, they still have to give the residents council their money.
And this is in public housing?
This is public housing, yes. So, you've got money so you could do activities, that type of thing, yes.
Well, what about if you're Section 8 and you're under public housing?
If you're Section 8
And you're
and
under
you,
public housing?
and you're in public housing, then you are a public housing tenant and all of this
That's what I
applies.
was thinking, so we can get funds for our tenant association,
Not your tenant association, it has to be a residence council,
your resident.
which means you have to organize it based on the regulations. Which means that the housing authority at somehow or another is gonna have to recognize this as a residence council.
And I might have missed it, but what is the difference between a residence council and a tenant association?
Public housing, that's the difference.
That's the difference.
Yeah, the
So-
difference is, I shouldn't be that simplistic, but the difference is that the residence council is governed by some federal regulations that you can find in 24 CFR, the Code of Federal Regulation. A tenant association is just a group of people who get together and they want to form a group, and they can be incorporated or unincorporated. So I'm not going to go through all the details about the funding. If you have questions, you can ask, but you know, you just sort of have to report that money, account for it, and that's a sort of sticking point with tenant associations and residence councils, tenant associations that have development agreements. People don't want to account for the money. People just want to treat it like, oh, well, this is how I do my business at home. And no, you have to account for that money. And see, and I say on the next page, a housing authority is not required to provide funds to a tenant association. The question is, if there is a residence council, can we have a tenant association also? And the answer is yes. But the tenant association is not gonna receive any money. There are some, I know I worked with at least one development where they did not trust the resident council because they felt the resident council was in league with the housing authority, and they wanted to form their own tenant association, which they did. The housing authority cannot interfere with that because the statute, which you're gonna get to in a minute or so, the tenant right to organize statute applies to all tenants in the district regardless of how they pay their rent. Okay, let's go on to tenant associations, and I think that's what the most of you have questions about. Okay, laying the groundwork. The reason why I wanted to do this session myself, and usually I'll have someone else come and do it, is because people are forming tenant associations, but they're not doing their homework before they actually do it. They just decide, oh, 3 of us, we gonna form this association. You have to develop trust if you want that association to sustain itself. And so people have to know who you are. So you need to lay the groundwork. Now, this is in general, you need to lay the groundwork. But if this is a TOPA situation, which is a Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act, you don't have time to fool around with all this stuff I'm getting ready to talk about, because you have only so many days to form that tenant association and get it registered so you can exercise the tenant's right to purchase the property. But what you have to do to lay the groundwork, yes.
Mr. Lloyd, I know I'm in your face all the time, but for a tenant, we are old tenant association, and you were there from our formation, but especially when we went through the first TOPA. This is the third TOPA we going through, but all the residents done changed, so I'm dealing with people that do not know me.
There you go.
So I'm glad you brought up, that's why I'm in here today, that trust has to be built. So it's like I'm starting a new tenant association. I'm serious with you.
We're doing it.
Because these people are, international.
Yeah.
Thank you. And that trust, that's why the girl see who was in this room. But the trust is not there. I've got 75% that don't even speak my language. So there's that no trust.
One of the things that we need to talk about.
Excuse me, may I say one thing to answer this young lady? I think if you're perfectly right, and I think too, we're all seniors. Some of us are seasoned, and then we have some who have no idea who they are. They don't want to be bothered with anything. They contradict you, they cause confusion and everything, and it makes everything
just going. to
Let's
feed
talk
the
about,
guys.
let's,
There's one more
Uh-huh.
aspect, there's another aspect too, because she helped us go through the whole thing, and I was like, green. And she helped us go through
Cause
the
I
whole
don't want her
thing.
to go
But
nowhere.
I knew everybody in the building, everybody knew me, so you had, the trust was there.
Oh.
Now, these people is turning over every 6 months, and people who put a sign, come to a meeting, they pass you by and don't even speak, don't, and you hold the door and they don't even say thank you, and I'm at the point where I'm like, okay, I'll tell you what, let something happen to you like that, that's people I would have warned you about. If it happened to you, you ain't spoke to me, you on your own.
But it's a different caliber of
We'll
people.
find out.
wait, let me go through these points, because
Okay, okay.
first you have to identify a need,
There you go.
because, people may not feel they need an association.
Yeah, that's true.
And if they feel like that, then, you know, one person shouldn't bust his or her butt to start a tenant association, and people don't feel that there is a need. And sometimes I tell people is you gotta sit quiet and listen, because he will be telling you stuff that if you're in a position where you're the only one doing the work, it may be time for the tenant association to go on hiatus or something. So you've got to identify the
In
need.
the middle of Topeka.
The other thing is you, in order to do that, you don't immediately jump out and have a meeting talking about housing code. You have social events. People are very, very social. And if you have a potluck or you bring some food, they will show up. And you can do things like play tenant bingo.
That's right.
Which is you got your bingo card, so instead of numbers on there, you have things on there like find the tenant who was born in Michigan. Find the tenant who plays the violin. So it means that you have to actually go around that room, introduce yourself to people, and find out something about them so that you could play tenant bingo. And there's all other kinds of games. I did not realize that a lot of the board games, like Monopoly and something similar to that, they get around the copyright law, but there are black versions of those board games. So you can play those games and try to, you know, get people to you know, come out and socialize and that type of thing. You can also do a tenant survey, which is included in your packet. That is a template. That doesn't mean you have to use that. You can add to it, you can detract from it, but you start recording information, collecting information on the tenants in the building. So you want to know if they're having any problems. You want to know if they have residents that are 62 years of age or older. So if it's a rent control building, you make sure that they get their paperwork in. At some point, you need all this information so that you could be a true advocate on behalf of the tenants. One of the things that bothers me a lot about tenant associations and management is people don't have a sense of who lives in the units. Management may not care, I don't know, but if you've got elderly people in the unit, you've got people who have disabilities, that type of thing. If there's a fire, then who figures out how these people are going to get out of the building? Yes.
That can be crazy, especially if you got people that don't trust you, and
Yeah.
you got the fire department and they're knocking on doors, and these people won't open the door.
Yeah.
They don't believe that
But-
you are who you say they are. They think that we had a smoke bad in the building. These ladies just refused to open the door. No, I'm not gonna open the bed to the door.
Part of the thing, and this is a whole separate issue that we could talk about for days, and the people that need to hear this are not in the room, is part of the problem with the Latino population in a building is that some of them may be undocumented and they are afraid. And you have to be sensitive, because even with our office, as much as we do, and we tell them we don't turn people in, they will not come to something like the summit, because they are afraid that someone's going to turn them in to immigration. And it will not be us, but, you know,
Well, they don't know whether Donald Trump has sent people out on the street.
right.
Really?
They don't. And see, that's part of the problem. We were talking in our office. For those of you who have attended the summit in the past, you know that we usually give away gifts
Yeah.
at lunchtime.
Yeah.
This year we decided that we're gonna take all that stuff that was collected and we're gonna send it to Houston.
Oh,
Because there are people that are in need, and the point I made was that the people that are in the greatest need
Right.
are people who are undocumented, because they can't apply for anything. Nothing. They can't apply for FEMA. They're even afraid to go to the shelter. So that may be the problem in your building. One way you can deal with that is you can identify someone who is Latino, who is Haitian, Ethiopian, that can help you bridge that gap. If that person trusts you, and then they're going out talking to other tenants, the tenants will trust that person. In our office, the person is Manuel Balones. I mean, he's well known in the Latino community. He goes out, we've done some outreach projects together, and I'm like, do you know everybody? I mean, you know, but he speaks Spanish. And so does Jocelyn, who works our front desk. And when people come in to the office, if I'm doing lunch release, and they ask if there's someone there who speaks Spanish, and they're sort of hesitant and afraid, and if I tell them yes, then, you know, it's like the doors open, the sky opens, and they're happy that they're gonna be able to speak to someone in their own language. And that's the same thing with people with Ethiopians, Haitians. I mean, you know, we have people on staff who can speak French. Yes.
So just quickly, on the property that we live on, the demographics have changed considerably. At one time, it was mostly African American, and now it is a mix of African American, Ethiopian, and Hispanic. And coming to the Tenant Association meetings, I feel that we're at a deficit because we don't have adequate interpreters. So is there a resource, is there an organization that maybe we could contact that could come out and do interpretation?
You can ask LEDC if they're willing to come out, or Housing Counseling Services has a Spanish-speaking person. You can also go through and see if OLA, the Office on Latino Affairs, can provide some assistance. And that director was one of the individuals that accepted the board on behalf of Jim Gray. The Office on African American Affairs, the Office on African Affairs can maybe of some assistance. And you see, the thing is, and I know that it's difficult for folks to deal with, but you have to sort of lay it out and deal with it. You've got these cultural differences that you have to bridge. Yes.
But I work LEDC to death. But I'm really trying to make this tenant association survive. And I do not speak Spanish. And between the older ones of us dying and all these new people coming in, it's just about Hispanic. And then the few blacks that are there are pissed because the meetings are long, because I have to have a translator. People have to understand what you're saying. And yesterday a lady took my head off. It gets on her nerves. I understand when you up talking, you gotta pause, you have to speak, then you got the translation. Now, is it possible to work with two organizations, LEDC and somebody else too?
Probably. You just have to ask them. You know, Nana may provide some assistance. I don't know. You have to ask those different organizations if they can provide some type of translation, interpretation services.
And one other question: is it against the law to use a tenant in the tenant association who speaks Spanish?
No, as long as you are comfortable with that person. If you're not comfortable, then you don't use them. I went to a property. It was a TOPA situation, and someone was there, Latino, and taking notes, and people thought that the person was with my office. And I had to tell them, they're not with my office. I said, more than likely that person was probably representing the landlord. So you have to sort of be, and see, one of the things, like for example, in our office, we don't, if we go out and a Spanish interpreter is needed, then Manuel will go out. We do not ask one of the tenants to do it because we don't know what in the devil they're saying. That we know with Manuel, we know what he said. It's just like the story that you just saw on the news where the guy down in Florida was doing sign language. He volunteered and it was all gibberish.
Right.
But my problem is this man will start to curse him. I don't care where we are. He is smart. This man is smart, and he wants to be involved in the Tenant Association, come to every meeting, but there's that side of him. I was with him at this lady's door, and he told her about her so-and-so self, and just bring your so-and-so kids to the meeting. And I was like, no, you cannot talk to people like that. Oh, Miss Juanita, that's how you get their ASS to do stuff. No.
Well, you know what, in that particular case, so we can get to this later, you may ask one of the nonprofits if they would be willing to come out and do some training. And make sure that that person is in there. So, you know, you have to meet your neighbors, and as Kermit said, this whole thing of just saying good morning, you know, when you get on the elevator. My mother, you know, I grew up at a time when my mother, you know, if you didn't speak to her in the morning, she said, did I sleep with you?
Yes.
And you know, so, you know, in our office, you know, it's good morning.
That's true.
Because that's just, you know, something that you do. When I lived in a complex where there was, you know, 11th floor, somebody get on the elevator, you say, good morning. When I get on the elevator in the Reeves Center, I say good morning, and when I get off, have a nice day. But there's some people, they're so evil. First of all, they let the doors close in my face. And all. The second is they don't say anything, but I can't help them people. They, you know, they need.
You know, with all due respect, I think that's kind of a cultural thing because I noticed that in my building.
Yeah. Now, it's a whole different situation.
Most white people don't do that.
Yeah. Right, they don't. And that's why, right, they don't. They don't. And then when you've got a building where millennials are coming in, that's a whole nother, because see, for them, nothing is an issue. They don't see the need for a tenant association unless they discover a Mickey Mouse in their unit, and all of a sudden, they're calling us asking, can they withhold their rent? I need to move because I don't feel safe.
They move.
Yes.
If white people come in, they will not participate in the Tenant Association. I have knocked on the door. I don't know how to reach them. And the ones that do come, I look up, we got the new person in. When that mouse comes, she says, oh, gosh, I cannot live here like that. And next thing I know, they done moved out. But some are staying, but they don't want nothing to do.
One of the things is that you could do is, and that's for another training, is to do sort of like a membership kit or something like this. So when someone moves in, this is a welcome package. Welcome to 930, 940, 960 Randolph Street. You know, and sort of give some information like, you know, this is the owner of the building, this is the property manager. Oh, the nearest bank is here, the nearest grocery store is here. So maybe that day will make them feel more comfortable. Yes, she had her hand up first.
When you said that just now, we have a tenant association, you know, but we have some of the members that are in it are bad characters, and they ran away all the good people, and we have a lot of good people there. But how could you buy little things like little gifts and just knock on people's doors to try to invite them again this year?
Yeah, you can do that if you
know,
have the.
That's what I think should be done. We have some that, you know, they might not even pay the dues or anything, but they're characters and they cause confusion.
I mean, no disrespect, because I am an elder. I'm over 60. But some of these tenant association and these senior buildings are off the hook. I mean, you would just, you know, the thing, and then they call me, this one will call me to talk about the president, and then this one, and I tell them our policy is we do not get involved in internal matters. When you got a problem, y'all need to figure it out, but some of it is like, it's just crazy. And why do you, I'll get you just a minute, Mayor. Why do you care whether or not you like someone if they can do the job? But you can't, or then the whole, I don't see this in most other tenant associations, but at these these people who want to be dictators.
Yes.
Oh,
You got
this
it.
is what I want, this is what we're gonna do. Well, you're not, you're just the president. You know, you get one vote like everybody else. Ms.
We
Mayor.
have committees like that.
Of course, you know, I live on my flat. And as part of the tenant association, we're having new residents who are being relocated from other properties that are being renovated. Okay? And when I say relocated, the city is relocating these residents, right? But because they're coming from communities that are not like the communities where they are moving into, where their houses, you can see their whole house down into the apartment that they are, that they're doing. As a tenant association, how can we help them with the traumatization that the children are having? Or with the negative behaviors that some of the adults are bringing with them? And I have suggested things like re-educating your residents as they come in. Does the tenant association, from the board, do we have the right to see the tenant selection criteria? Because there's some real serious problems going on with people being relocated from
I think you have you can certainly ask what the criteria is for renting at your building. You do not have the right to ask to see the tenant roll unless it's a TOPA situation. I think that Miss Mabel and I used to be neighbors, so I know what building she's talking about. I'm gonna tell you, I know that, and I live around the corner now, I know that the apartment complex where I live are not going to take a huge number of people from these developments. Because they're gonna go out looking for it. They love government employees. They're not gonna have folks coming here just because you live over here and you act crazy and you're fussing and fighting and you're selling drugs and you're doing this and you're doing that. But they're not gonna put up with it. Management is not gonna put up with it, and they're not gonna take. But some of these buildings are taking 50, 60, 100, 200 people that come in with a different attitude, a different mindset and behavior about what it means to be a good tenant and to be a good neighbor. So if you let your children run wild at this project, when you move, you want to continue to let them run wild. But they're not going to run wild around me because I'm tired when I come home. So you need to control your children and that type of thing. But I think it's something that the Tenant Association, probably the board, probably needs to sit down and talk about it and work through and figure out what they can do. I mean, there's even, not even with the Tenant Association, there's a different change in people moving into a building and they are not accustomed to keeping their unit up.
Yeah.
Some people do not know what they are supposed to do.
I believe that.
That they don't know you're supposed to wash, wipe do your walls. And my mother had a thing about fingerprints, so we all had to always go through periodically clean the wall. So you're facing a very difficult situation because the owners of that building want that money. Because these people are subsidized. They can charge the highest maximum amount, whereas a non-subsidized person moving into that unit who doesn't have a voucher, whatever, they're only gonna be willing to pay, let's say, $1,000. Whereas the housing authority with that voucher, they're willing to pay $1,800. So yeah, they want that money.
That's right.
And so
Yeah.
after they get 30% is
Yeah.
the law.
Yeah.
After you get 30% of your, is that of your occupancy or is it 30%? How does that 30% work?
Okay, what it means is whatever the rent is,
No, I mean, the amount of tenants that you have. You can have 30%.
don't,
Is there anything that says you can
No.
have 30%
no,
occupancy
no. Not unless there's,
if it's a tax credit?
if there's a tax credit building, that, to talk about that, but other than that, nah, there's nothing that says, oh, we've accepted our fair share.
Yes.
We took,
yes.
we took 50 families and we're not gonna take any more. There's nothing, because you gotta be careful too, that if you start rejecting some of these people, then you run afoul of the discrimination law. And in the district, those, factors are more extensive than under federal law, because we add things like political affiliation, what you look like. Somebody doesn't want a skinny person moving in, doesn't want a fat person moving in. So it's all kinds of things, sexual orientation. I mean, it's a whole bunch of stuff, and you have to really be careful so as not to run afoul of the law.
So
Yes.
when we get to DC warehouse at,
Where? I would say call the DC Office on Human Rights. As a matter of fact, they're here. They have a table, and Teresa Rainey is there, and have her either send you a copy of the law or give you the citation so that you could pull it up and print it off.
Teresa Rainey?
Teresa Rainey, Rainey.
that's a serious problem.
And they do some really good training and stuff too.
What about people smoking in their?
Okay, I don't wanna get on the specifics, cause I've gotta get through this form in the Tenant Association, so yes.
I'm sorry.
I was listening to this part about people moving in. You know, years ago, the owners of the building, if they wanted to do the right thing, they would have things like after-school programs.
Uh-huh.
Hire people in the building to watch the kids after school, do things for them. But see, they don't do that anymore, because it's all about money. They just want the money in.
Well, that's one of
And
the,
that would really help. That would really help.
but that is something that the Tenant Association can discuss with management. What are we
Yeah,
gonna
you have to
do?
do it with
What are we
management.
gonna do about these kids? You know,
Well, you
that
have an
type of thing.
after-school program, you
Yeah.
have people there who would do things with them and help them, and we
Yeah.
did it at Park Southern years ago.
Right.
We did it there, and it was wonderful. So, it can be done, but you gotta have the right, tenants in it, you gotta have the right people, and everybody, and you gotta be, everybody's gotta try to love one another, and we can't, say things to them or anything, you just, and when you ignore them, it's worse. So you really gotta have some kind of.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about the tenant right to organize, which is a statute that was passed in 2006. It was the 2006 amendment to rent control. And basically what it says is that tenants have the right to organize in the District of Columbia without interference from management, owners, or their agents. I included a copy of the statute in your materials. There is a substantial fine if they violate the statute. The trick is coming up with proof that they violated the statute, because they are not going to snatch your flyers down in the middle of the day that everybody can see. They're gonna do it at night when people aren't around. But I tell folks, everybody's got a camera on their phone. If you see it, snap a picture of it. Tenants have a right to post flyers in common areas. They have a right to use common areas to meet. And common areas are not just a social room in your building. If you have a laundry room, and that is the only common area, you can meet in the laundry room. You can meet in the lobby so long as you're not keeping people from entering and exiting the building. So I would encourage you to read the statute. If you have any questions, you can certainly contact me. There have been a couple of cases where they have filed against the landlord. I've got one request in that I'm going to work on because it's a project-based Section 8 building, and the management has told them they don't want them posting flyers, that type of thing. So it's time to send the nasty letter, the nice nasty letter saying you need to contact your attorney, your legal counsel, so they can explain to you what this statute means, and that you may be liable for a substantial fine if you violate it.
Just for an example of what she's saying, our previous property manager was very adverse to the tenants, to be nice about it. And I would put up flyers and everything around for the meeting, like near mailboxes, because everybody goes to the mailbox, or to the front door, because everybody goes out the front door. She was, or I put it in the elevator, because everybody used the elevator. She would take all everything down, and she had a confrontation with me, saying, well, you can only put it up in the bulletin board in the laundry. Well, not everybody uses the laundry room, and not everybody is capable of getting down to the laundry room, which is in the basement. We have people that are in wheelchairs, and people who are indigent. They can't get down there, but they gotta get their mail picked up. You know, somebody's gotta come through the front door, they're aid and stuff. So we had a problem with her. So I was very confrontational. So she would take me there, I'd come back up. And it went like that until I had my meeting. But you have to look out for, what that's about is to try to keep people off from being able to communicate with each other. That's about the power.
You can put flyers under the door.
I do all that.
And I tell people, if you're going to do that, you've got to develop that risk action so that when you slip it under that door, it goes all the way in, because if part of the paper is sticking out, they'll come and pull it out. Now, if you have a tenant that says, I don't want that information, basically what you tell them is you need to take this piece of paper down to recycling and put it in the bin. That, you know, don't make such a big deal out of it if you don't want it, but we have the right to do this. Because communication is key. Someone had a question, then I'm gonna speed it up because you did.
I know you had just mentioned something about the flyers. I know when I was president and secretary of the association where I live, I was placing them in our elevators. We have 2 elevators, front and the back, and they told us about maybe 3-4 months ago that we could not place them in the elevators anymore. They would take them down. So we have glass bulletin on for each floor. So I do that on the outside, and I also do at our security desk, and I do like at the security desk, and then at the elevator, the front elevator. I don't put it inside the elevator.
All this means is, how are you, Mayor Bray?
Yes. Are you?
What
did you come in and break up the sandwich?
All it means is, one of the things is that you have to know your building. You have to know where people enter and exit.
Right.
I know that when I lived in the same complex as Miss Mabel, some people never went to the mailboxes because they had a post office box. They only came in through the garage entrance. So you had to make sure that you put something there, so that you can give people an opportunity to know that there will be a meeting. And if you have a problem, you can give us a call. Again, as I said, we do the nice nasty letter. It's like, you know, you're gonna end up in court if you keep trying to violate. And I remember one that I worked on, a case that I worked on, where I ended up having to do 3 separate letters. And finally I said, it is enough. Now, if you're gonna continue to do this, you will be sued. And come to find out was, she, you know, would tell the owners that, oh, well, this is not a problem, you don't have to pay attention to them. Because when we're sending it to the owners, because your little property manager doesn't have to pay anything. You are the owner. You're gonna have to pay this fine, this $10,000 fine. So, you know, you need to, and I do remember once being in a meeting with the chief tenant advocate, the property manager for a property, and the owners. And the owners didn't know what the property managers were doing.
Yeah.
They were like, so, you know, there's a way that you do this. You send it to the owner, you can copy the property manager, so that everybody knows. Let's go on. There's big decisions that you have to make when you're trying to form a tenant association. One is whether or not you're going to be incorporated or unincorporated. And we're going to get to the factors that you need to consider. And also, should you call a meeting of tenants to say, we want to form a tenant association? We want your ideas, or do you just want the 3 people to serve as directors and incorporators to go ahead and file the paperwork that establishes the tenant association? Remembering that you know your building better, your property better than I do. So you know whether or not someone's gonna really have their nose out of joint if you jump up and incorporate a tenant association and you didn't ask all the tenants beforehand whether or not this is something that needs to be done.
It takes 3 people?
In the district. See, you're over in Maryland, but it takes, I'm gonna get through the requirements. You had a question?
Yes, in reference to that. I'm in the senior building and people on wheelchair, their wheelchairs down. A lot of them have oxygen tanks and people with disabilities. We formed a tenant association, right? They voted 3 of us into our offices, right? Now, 2 of them got jobs. I'm the one that started it, but they want out. I know we have to vote them out. So they want out. There's no one else in the building that want to join because they're up in age. They're all up in age. I'm the vice president. So I'm the sole one that started this thing because the building was being sold and I couldn't see what was going to happen.
Let me give you a quick answer, then we need to move on, is when you get to a situation where there's only one person willing to work or one person is doing all the work, then you're gonna have to be honest on whether or not the tenant association is going to remain. I mean, it may be sometimes you gotta walk away and say, look, I'll take care of what happens in my unit, and I hope it doesn't reach like that, but one of the things is we know from experience is that for a tenant association, you're not gonna get 100%, but if you get a critical mass of people willing to do the work, you can sustain yourself, you can proceed. But when you have people that don't wanna do the work, they only want 1 or 2 people to do the work, but they wanna reap all the benefits, then that's when you're honest and you tell them, look, you're not putting in the time for this. Because a lot of people, whether they're in senior housing, public housing, subsidized housing, market rate, rent control, they have other things to do besides a tenant association. They've got to fix dinner. They got to do laundry. They got to go to work. And so they can't devote 24 hours to the tenant association while everybody else sits and does nothing. Let's talk about real quick incorporating versus non-incorporation. What do you consider? What factors do you consider? One is image. Some people do not think you're legitimate unless you are incorporated. Liability. If you are incorporated, basically what it means is that your board of directors and your officers are not personally liable for the financial actions of, or liable as a board member. It's called piercing the corporate veil, and basically what it says is that to make them liable, you have to pierce that corporate veil, and it is not easy to do. So I share with you this experience when we were in the middle of a TOPA situation and we had to go to arbitration. and usually the losing party has to pay. And we didn't prevail. And I remember one of the guys from the calling up telling me, well, Dolores, you know, we're gonna do this to the office, we're gonna do this. And I'm like, you went to law school just like I did. Pierce the corporate veil, click. Because you can't go after us personally for that. Another reason why you may want to incorporate, consider is organization. It's a way of organizing things. And then accountability. What are the cons? Money. It costs money to incorporate. And you can't say it only costs $80, because if you are in a development where people are on fixed income, limited income, coming up with $80 may be problematic. And then the other con is compliance. You might not want to comply with the regulations, the statute. But let me tell you, the compliance is so simple. It's like every 2 years you fill out this form and pay some money. It's not such a big deal.
What is the form that you fill out every 2 years?
I don't know what it's called, but it's online.
Okay.
If you email me, I can tell you exactly what it is. All it is they just want to know who are the officers now.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, it's not a big thing.
We have to do that.
So if you want to start a tenant association, what do during your initial meeting? You're going to pick a convenient location. Some buildings have community rooms, some do not. You can use a library, you can use the police station, you can use a community, a recreation center. Just find a convenient location to meet. You need to publicize the meeting, the flyer, email, a listserv, Twitter, Facebook. Now, I don't know anything about Twitter and Facebook because I don't do social media, but some people are so into that that's the only way you can communicate with them, then that's what you do. You need to identify who's going to be the facilitators, who is going to be the people to run the meeting. You always need to have a sign-up sheet. You always want to collect this information at every meeting. You need someone to take notes, a scribe. Even though you're not officially a tenant association yet, you need to keep a record of what went on. You want to be attentive to time. I know for me, I'm not going to a 3-hour meeting unless it has to do with total. I have other things to do and television shows to watch. And so I'm not going to be there. You start at 7, it's 10 o'clock. I'm like, Greenleaf is coming on. Bye. You want to be attentive to people's time. And you want to have an agenda. You want to identify, this is what we're going to talk about. And you could do some kind of little icebreaker so that people can be aware or at least learn about each other. Let's talk about the incorporation process real quick. Incorporating is not hard. It's just simply isn't. There's 3 ways to incorporate. I'm not going to go through each slide because it's there, but you've got, I call it snail mail. You're mailing it off. You could do it online or you could do it in person. If you are going to use snail mail, well, let me step back first before we do anything. In order to incorporate, these are the people that you need. You need an incorporator. That is the person that is going to take responsibility for getting your articles of incorporation notarized. That person has no more power than anybody else. So don't let people start tripping like I was incorporated, so what I say goes. It doesn't work like that.
Does it have to be a separate
You,
person?
huh?
It has to be a separate person from the president?
No, because you don't have officers yet.
Oh, okay, got it.
You have a registered agent. That is the person that is going to receive official mail. If someone pulls it up online for ABC Tenant Association, they look and see who's the registered agent, that's who they send it to. And then you need in the district at least 3 directors, and the directors are responsible for the overall policy and direction of the association. The incorporator, the registered agent, and one of the directors can be the same person. Okay? So, let's talk about the factors real quick in terms of how you're going to incorporate. The things that you want to consider is time. If it is a TOPA situation, your building is up for sale, you do not have the luxury of dilly-dallying around and doing all this kind of stuff. Usually what happens in a lot of situations is the tenants don't go pick up the certified letter. So they say, well, the time doesn't count until whenever, and we have to explain to them, the time the clock starts ticking when they leave that pink slip in your mailbox. So when you're coming to us, and you only got a week to organize, because you let all this time go by. And so then money. There is a cost difference in the various ways that you incorporate. Let's see what my time is. Oh, okay, good. So snail mail. Snail mail is not difficult. You get a sample copy of the articles from me. I have a sample copy in your handouts. All you have to do is insert information where indicated. It is not rocket science. Everything is in there that you need. When I first started, we did the articles, we had the sample articles, but we didn't have included in the articles the fact that the tenant association can own, lease, or sell property. So those of you who have been involved in TOPA situations know that they're always looking for a way to challenge the tenant's right to exercise that right. And one of the things they came up with, well, you don't have anything in there that the association has the right to do that. It is included in your sample now. It's no big deal if you're never going to have to deal with it, but if you do deal with it, it's there. And it just says basically you have the right to do this.
You have the right
To buy, sell, or lease property.
so our old bylaws don't have that in there.
That's not your bylaws. These are your articles of incorporation. This is what gets filed with district government. Your bylaws are internal.
Okay, so
And
if we have the old one and not this one, I need to change it?
no. They have never challenged you. This is your third TOPA.
Right.
They've never challenged that.
So the articles of incorporation, you said they're on file, so we
You
can,
filed them with the Department of Consumer and Regulatory Affairs.
so I can request a copy of our original articles of incorporation if I can't locate.
If you can't locate, you can request a copy.
Okay.
You can go online to see if you can access it online. You may not be able to, but who knows?
Okay.
So for snail mail, again, you identify the incorporator, someone to serve as the registered agent, and 3 people to serve as the additional directors. And you have to make what they call duplicate notarized copies. So you make 4 copies of your articles, and each copy gets notarized. Then, of course, you have to make a copy for your records. That gets sent to the Department of Consumer and Regulatory Affairs, to the Corporation Division, along with a check or money order for $80.
Yes.
Now, the trick with snail mail is it takes 3 to 4 weeks to process, because it goes to a drop box. It's a post office box, and they don't pick it up every day. So it takes time. So if you have the luxury of time that you could do this, snail mail is fine. Once approved, DCRA's court will send you a certificate of good standing. If you want to do it online, you can. And that is what corporations prefer that people do, but it's up to you whether or not you want to do that. We can walk you through the process. Basically, you go to DCRA's website, and I list here everything that you need to do, where you need to click on. You're going to have to go onto the Corp Online portal. You're going to have to create an account for yourself, a username and a password.
Can you say that one more time? I'm sorry. Go to the online portal for the
The
department.
Corp Online portal.
Corp online.
Yeah, you don't have to, it's, when you're blind. Yeah, it's Sarah, it's that.
I got it right here.
Yeah, so you want to do that, and then you go to business filing, you have to drop down the form. And see, what you have to do is with the sample articles, you see all that verbiage in there, that doesn't get included in the online articles. They want to know who's the incorporator, who are the directors, who's your registered agent. Then there's a miscellaneous box, and you take that whole purpose out of the articles, and you just cut and paste and drop it in. That's all you have to do. And then you pay with a credit card. And they have 7 days to process the online application. once it's processed, yeah, because you're doing it online. So you have to pay by credit card.
Or debit card.
Or, yeah, bank card, anything, bank card or credit card. Your debit card.
If you don't want to use your name, just have another account set aside and use that money out of that.
Or you can buy one of those cards, you know those cards that you put 20 on, you can use that if you want to use
Yeah.
it.
Just load the card, just load the card.
And they will send you a certificate of good standing and they'll send it by email. Now, if you run into problems trying to incorporate online, all you have to do, you have two options. One, you can call me and we can go through it together over the telephone. I'll log in and walk you through the steps, or you can come in and I will actually go online. You'll tell me what you want to use as your username and password, and we can do it like that. I have done that for a couple of associations. The last way to incorporate is in person. It is the most expensive way to do it. But if you are in a TOPA situation, you don't have any other alternative. And basically what you have to do is take 4 duplicate copies of or originals that have been notarized. You take them to DCRA on 4th Street, you hand it to them, and you are going to give them a check or money order. I think you can pay by credit card too, in the amount of $180 or $130. It is an extra $100 if you want it processed that day. If you want to process 3 days, within 3 days, then it's an extra $50. That is very expensive, but some people don't have to. I work with a group, and I think they try to do everything in 3 days. So they were rushing to get it all done. But it was not a large building, so you could do that. So what do you do after incorporation? That's when the hard work comes. Incorporation is nothing. It's after incorporation that you really got to go to work and figure out what you're going to do. You have to draft and approve bylaws. And in the next session, I will provide a sample set of bylaws. That's all it is a sample set. See, people don't want to do the work. They want to take the bylaws, like the article, and just put the name of the association and that's it. You really have to think about your association and what do you want. Because things like, how are you going to elect your officers? Are you going to have a board of directors and then have a separate set of officers? Or are you going to have a board of directors / president, board of directors / a director / vice president? You have to decide that. How are you going to elect your officers? Are you going to have the membership elect the directors and the officers? Or are you going to have the membership elect the directors and then the directors among themselves decide to elect the officers? Yes.
Maybe I missed something. Many years ago, you were, I think, part of the incorporation,
Speak up some.
the Tenant Association. Now, can we change anything in those corporations, like how we elected all
Yes. I will not talk about it in this session, but unlike the articles, which probably will never, ever change, your bylaws will periodically change because circumstances change. And you may want to go in and decide you want to change how the officers are elected, or you want to name other officers, you want to change how membership is done by the association. You may want to change the amount of dues. So all of that in your bylaws, you will have one section that deals with amendments. How do you approve amendments to the bylaws? And usually it's substantial, like 2/3 of the members present as opposed to a majority. So you can do that.
Can you, like I think I asked before, have like co-chairs instead of presidents?
Yes.
No.
Yeah. I just did one that I didn't do it, but they called me, they didn't want president, vice president, so the 4 of them are co-chair. And I'm like, whatever.
Can you specify they be of different races? Can you specify they be of different races? I mean.
No.
Why would
Like, at least not in the District of Columbia, because you're gonna run into some problems.
Well, the reason
But what
is-
you want to do what you want to
It's
do
more
is,
representative.
when you decide to have your election of directors and officers, one of the ways you can deal with it is have a committee come together and solicit people or nominate or identify people that could make good officers, keeping in mind that if you're in a building that is diverse, you want a diverse
That's
group
nice.
of directors and officers, you can do it that way. I would recommend that, for your bylaws, that you have a ad hoc small committee to draft the bylaws, and then it could be presented, to the tenants for discussion, and either they vote on it then, or you go back and incorporate the changes and bring it back for a vote. You cannot draft bylaws in a general meeting, you just don't have the time to do that. Yes?
When I came on board from my tenant association, our previous bylaws was all messed up, all screwed up. But when they gave me a copy, I didn't even understand it, didn't even understand the reading. So, the lady that came on as president, she incorporated, to have it amended. And, they did a lot of changes, the lawyer that we had to do it, because it was jibber with what was written down before. And now it's a clear thing, because when I became the president, in the time that we had the meeting and read over our bylaws, and everybody in the meeting at the time said they wanted to take the bylaws, just said they were. And I was the one that signed the bylaws.
You can, one of the things that is very important is that you have good record keeping, that you have a good copy of the articles and the bylaws. I'm gonna tell you some of the horror stories. One, you know, trying to convince me that these are the amended bylaws for an organization, because this is what you want done. And you're mad at the officer, and it's not even different. And I'm reading, I'm going, this makes no sense. You got handwritten notes and all this kind of stuff on it. No, that's not how it's done. You have to be considerate. So your bylaws is an internal document, and please do not follow the DCRA. Let me quickly go through sustainability. What? You don't file with it. It's an internal document. It just, the bylaws stays with your association.
But I thought all them papers you doing talking on all that.
That's something different than filing with DCRA. That's filing with the Department of Housing and Community Development.
I got it.
Yeah, so you have to do all of that. So sustainability, the thing is you want to sustain the tenant association. I will tell you one of the saddest things for me, I'm down to the point I was sad because originally I was pissed off. I have traveled all over the city to help people form tenant associations. I'm out, I do not drive. I'm out 9, 10 o'clock trying to figure out how to get home. Sometimes the taxis don't want to come and get me because they don't like the part of town I'm in or where I live, and I'm doing all this stuff. So we're trying to update our master list that is on the website. And so I've asked corporations to send me a list of active tenant associations, and I went through, so it's over 300 and something on the website. I just did a mailing for 112, that's it. And the other day, 5 of them came back. People are not doing compliance. Because if you don't comply, then your association is revoked. And I was ticked off because I know, you know, I'm just like, but then you're gonna call me up and say, oh gosh, we having problems, you gotta come and help, and all this kind of stuff. The whole purpose of forming the tenant association to advocate on behalf of the residents of your building, also so that you can coalesce. Because folks, we are in a fight for our lives in terms of affordable housing in the District of Columbia. And you do that by all the associations coming together so that you can show up at city council meetings and that type of thing. So, you know, what's the purpose of starting the tenant association if you're not gonna keep it going? I'm sad now, because at first I was like ticked off. I was just in my little cubicle cussing up a storm, just mad. And I'm going, oh, what happened to this person? What happened to that person? Now, you know, it's just sad because I've been in a lot of these buildings. I know the issues that are present. And if you're not willing to fight for yourself, don't expect me to be out there at 10 o'clock at night. Okay? So what you want for sustainability, you have to have regularly scheduled meetings. There is no law that says you have to meet monthly. Some associations meet every other month. There's one association in town that meets once a year. And as a matter of fact, that person talked about it in a session year before last. And a woman got up to chastise her for only meeting once a year and not meeting on the premises because they chose to meet at the library. I could not get back there fast enough because I was tell sister friend off. It's like you don't get into other people's business. It works for them. And I wanted to tell her, you are in a building with all these housing code violations and stuff. They don't have that issue. And they have money in that building. They have other issues that they're dealing with, and they have elected and decided the tenants is we want our board to do all this stuff. So the board can meet monthly, but the association as a whole doesn't have to meet. You need good communication internally and externally. You have to keep people informed. You need transparency. All of this stuff, I'm gonna do this stuff in secret, isn't gonna work. You have to be transparent. You have to have good record keeping, and you have to have good finances. And folks are, you know, fudging with the budget, fudging with the money, not doing reports. And some of these associations, some of these tenant associations are in development agreements with the owners, and they get money. And I'm not talking about no $5,000. I'm talking $50, $70, $100,000. You got to account for that money. You just can't spend it. Yes.
We at Urban Village, we're 15% owner, and we bring in, we have a huge budget. We pay our community, we pay for, we put a lot of money. Yeah.
Oh, I need to talk to both of you.
Yeah, that is what, it's part of your TOPA process. That's what you negotiate.
That's right.
Well, okay, I heard you all talk about that at some of these meetings we've been to. Our lawyer advised against that. I can't remember now, but I'm going back to her. I'm going back to her because the lawyer said if you have a development agreement, it can always be amended.
You don't really want to do that. You want to, when you develop the agreement, you want to develop a document that is tight. So that in case they do not fulfill their responsibilities, you can take them to court on it.
So don't add anything to it.
You don't want a spongy.
Yeah. So you
Well,
want,
we did not get that in ours, and I feel bad about that, but the attorney advised me against that, but next week I'm gonna have a conversation with her.
you can certainly ask the attorney to explain why she is advising against that.
Now, when you say
Wait.
Can I say something? We got a few
Uh-huh.
minutes. Persons that are in, owners and things like that. The association needs money to survive.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so if you're gonna sell that building, you make sure you put enough in that agreement with that new owner,
Uh-huh.
so that he can help you build up that bank account.
Yep.
Until you can have your little fundraiser, okay? Because it costs money, okay, and you might have to pay the little kids a little stipend to pass out the flyer.
See, some of these associations, they don't charge dues because they get development money.
Right.
And, you know, the development money can come from just a certain amount that the owner gives, or it can be a certain percentage of the money collected in the laundry. I mean, it could be anything. That's something you need to work out with an attorney. But if you're gonna do that, even if you don't have a development agreement, you need to keep the finances clean. So, and then the last thing is compliance, and I had already talked about that, is that you have to submit that form every 2 years. So forming a tenant association is not hard, it's sustaining it is where the work comes in, but it certainly is a benefit I'm not a member of the Tenant Association in my complex, because I don't think we have to pay dues. We don't have a lot of housing code issues, but if the building ever goes up for sale, then, you know, we would certainly exercise our right to purchase. I'm not certain people would want to purchase their units, but we could certainly assign our rights to another developer, because it's a prime piece of property. And somebody would want that property, and we would just say, if you want it, this is what we want out of it.
There you go.
Any,
Mr. Lawrence,
uh-huh.
I need you to come and talk to my, board member, because under here you said, record keeping,
Uh-huh.
good finances and transparency. I cannot get notes from the secretary. I end up doing a meeting and taking notes. I cannot get
The secretary needs to go. You got to have something in your bylaws about how to remove an officer. I will not come out to your building only because we're finally gonna get the Education Institute off the ground, and there's 11 courses. And if you complete that course, you get the certificate. And one of the courses are Renters 101. There's something on financing, there's something on communication, there's something on record keeping. So all of that is included. And this whole thing, like for example, with record keeping,
Yeah.
people think you have to take down verbatim what people say. You do not. That is not how minutes are taken. You have to make sure you include in there what was moved, second, and the vote. Now, there may be an occasion where you do want that verbatim. For example, when I lived in the building complex where Miss Mabel lived, and we had the fatal fire. Mayor Gray was a new council member, and we were meeting with management and that type of thing, and he wanted someone to take the minutes, the scribe, and that ended up being me, and I took down stuff verbatim. And it was important because we went back when they were like trying to back out of stuff, like, no, on such a date, you said this, and this. So there's a lot of things that you need to do to sustain your organization. It is a lot of hard work. I personally think it is worth it because you want to live in a place that is habitable, safe. You don't have to love your neighbors. See, I don't have to love my neighbors, but I do respect the people that I live around.
Yeah.
But how do you get the secretary to take notes and then type up and give them to you?
Well, you need to see me,
She
cause.
told me she had a whole, she said, I got them in a bag.
Look at another secretary.
Yeah, you have.
Okay, because we're running out of time, but let me tell you, you need to look at your bylaws and see what it takes to remove an officer. I had a friend who wanted to be secretary of a tenant association, and I told this person, this is what I did, is after the meeting, I immediately, because I did it like, I took notes like when I was in law school, stuff, I was just all kinds of stuff. Then I would go that night and I would put them in some order so that I could remember. And then I would write them out and type them up. And the person thought, oh, well, this is gonna be cool to be the secretary. And it was a lot of work. And she was like, oh, I can't do that, that's too much work. I said, I told you it was a lot of work. It's hard work, it's a lot of work that you're putting into being an officer in a tenant association. Yes?
Could you suggest some good lawyers?
No. We cannot, as a government employee, I cannot make a personal referral for an attorney.
Could I offer her?
You can talk to her, yeah.
Okay, there is a guide that's put out by, law firm, the law center at Georgetown. It's a resource guide. Contact Georgetown because they have a recent copy printed up. It has.
I say that again, have a resource.
It's a resource guide. The Hamilton Institute is the law center at Georgetown. It is a resource guide. They may have something this year, they had it last year. Ask them if they have any printed up. Ask them if they mail one to you. If they don't have it, mail to you. Ask them if it's online, so you can look at it online. In that resource guide is just about everything you're going to need to know about trying to deal with tenant associations, from lawyers to various organizations.
It's a tenant survival guide.
Yeah, the tenant survival guide.
Thank you.
Put out by Georgetown
By,
University.
Yes.
by the Hamilton Institute.
Harrison,
Georgetown-
Harrison
Harrison
Institute. And people have asked us they want copies of it, and when are you gonna update it? And we had to explain to them, it was never ours to update. It is copyrighted. It belongs to the Harrison Institute. So before you leave, please fill out the evaluations and turn them in. And I do thank you for your patience, your questions. If you need some assistance, I would recommend that you contact me within the next several weeks, because I am scheduled to have a shoulder replacement surgery, and I will be out for, I don't even know how long, 4 to 6 weeks, I don't know. But I will try my best to assist you in any way I can. Yes, ma'am.
Just say, there are times when I have been concerned when various agencies will come out in this and attempt to give out information regarding tenants' rights and those things. Do you all audit those agencies and do you all
No.
look at what they're putting out?
No,
there?
those agencies come through Department of Housing and Community Development. Let me tell you what our policy is. If a tenant calls us up, or a tenant association, and they state that they're working with XYZ organization, we will not work with them. It's a duplication of effort. We have no control what another agency says. We know what we're saying. So if you have to make a decision. If you're gonna either work with this agency, or you're gonna work with us. And, you know, our feelings aren't hurt if you decide you wanna work with that agency, but we're not going to have, you know, we're giving information and advice, they're giving information and advice. But what I tell tenants is you've got to learn this information, because sometimes people stand up and say stuff and it's not right. It is incorrect. So, I know she's doing, because I remember when we did our first TOPA thing, and I was just not impressed with the information that was provided. But yes, Miss Gail, and then we're gonna conclude.
Yeah, I can, give up a chance to thank you so much.
We're gonna miss her.
Yes.
We're gonna miss her.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
I wanna thank you so much.
I want to say this about Gail, if you don't mind if I say this, do you?
No, of course. 'Cause
And
you
Gail
know-
would come to us, and then I told Gail, you got to get it together. You got to do this, you got to do that. And the day she received that check and brought it into the stakeholders meeting and showed us how much money she got, it was one of the good success stories. And my other one before we leave is Juanita. When we first met Juanita, she was quiet as a church mouse. She didn't say anything. Several years later, I'm at the tenant town hall, and she's standing at the meeting. Yeah. I'm like, who is this person? Yes. So thank you very, very much. The next session starts at 3:15, and it's going to be on bylaws.
Okay.